Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight into a pretty significant statement.
Yeah, the one Ko Wen-je made at his second court hearing, April 17th, 2025.
Exactly. And for anyone needing a quick catch-up, Ko Wen-je, the doctor turned politician, former Taipei mayor, he's facing legal issues from his time in office.
Right, and he's been pretty consistent in saying he never sought personal gain, never engaged in corruption.
So we want to unpack his statement from that hearing. It's a lot to take in if you just read the whole thing cold.
Definitely. These legal cases can get really complex really fast. So our aim here is to kind of pull out the main threads, understand his arguments, what he's worried about.
Without getting bogged down in all the legal jargon, we want to get to the core of what he's saying.
Precisely. So the mission, if you like, is to grasp his key points, his concerns about the judicial process itself, and, interestingly, his call for the public to keep watching this case.
And we're using excerpts from his full statement as our guide here, so let's dive in. Where does he start?
Detention, right. Yeah, that's one of the first things he brings up. Says he's been detained, denied visitation for 8 months.
8 months.
And he emphasizes, that he feels there's a lack of substantial evidence, even from his perspective. He asks this question, what is going on here?
That really sets a tone, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sort of confusion and maybe injustice.
I think that's the feeling he's trying to convey.
Yeah.
It immediately puts the focus on due process, transparency, things you'd expect in any legal situation, let alone one this high profile.
Okay, so after detention, what's next? The money allegations.
Yep. Political donations, public interest funds, he tackles those directly. His line is, absolutely no criminal intent.
He insists all the money from supporters, it went straight to election stuff, party business.
Nothing in his own pocket. And he points to a government investigation, says it lasted a year, and claims it backs him up on this.
But he doesn't just defend, he also sort of pushes back.
Oh, yeah. He says, look, if there were procedural flaws, okay, maybe execution could be improved. But he labels the whole thing prosecutorial abuse.
Strong words. Prosecutorial abuse suggests he thinks it's politically motivated.
That's often the implication with that phrase. Yeah, like the legal system is being used unfairly against him. It's a serious charge. He also kind of touches on a bigger idea.
About who owns political donations.
Exactly. State versus the individual donor. But he quickly pivots back to his main point. His moral responsibility to the people who gave the money. He feels he owes it to them to use it as they expected.
That moral obligation theme, it seems quite central. Okay, let's shift to the Jinghua City case. That was the main event at this hearing, wasn't it?
It seems so. And for context, Jinghua City is this big urban development project. The allegations swirl around improper approvals, potential favoritism, that sort of thing.
Right, but before getting into the nitty-gritty, he talks about his principles as mayor.
Yes, he lays out 3 key things. Transparency, collective wisdom, basically trusting the team, the experts, and relying on systems, not just one person's say-so.
He seems to be setting up a defense based on how the city government functioned under him.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
He argues that while, okay, maybe there's some flexibility needed sometimes under political pressure, as long as it's within the law, but actually breaking the law, he calls that simply impossible given how things were set up.
Okay, so how does he apply that to the specific allegations? The prosecution apparently listed 7 acts of protection. He tackles those.
He does. First up, the lunchbox meetings.
Yeah, it's informal.
But he argues they weren't. He describes a proper system. SOP standard operating procedures.
Okay.
Pre-meetings for prep, departments submitting actual proposals, open discussions, and crucially, recorded minutes. Official records.
So he's using the bureaucracy as his shield in a way.
Kinda, yeah. Saying the process itself made it hard for him to just dictate something improper. It wasn't just him making calls over sandwiches.
Makes sense. What about the review process for the project itself? Jinghua City must have gone through a lot of hoops.
Oh, absolutely. He lists them out. You've got the Urban Planning Committee.
Standard stuff.
The Urban Design Review Committee. Advisory panels with outside experts, special task forces, and just tons of regular city employees, public servants, doing their jobs at each stage.
And he mentioned recordings, too.
Yes, specifically for the Urban Planning Committee meetings under his watch, audio and video.
That's quite specific.
It is. And his argument is, with all these eyes on it, all these checks, all these recordings, how could someone knowingly commit an illegal act for profit? He contrasts it with scenarios where maybe only 1 or 2 people are involved.
Right. Less oversight, more opportunity.
That's the implication. He also denies knowing much about the Jinghua case specifics as they move through these stages.
So the idea that he was micromanaging it or pushing it via his secretary.
He says that's impossible.
Yeah.
If he didn't know the details, how could he instruct his secretary to interfere? That's his logic.
Okay, then there's that note, the one he gave to the director of economic development. The prosecution framed that as pressure, didn't they?
They seem to have. But Ko's explanation is different. He says documents were going back and forth for 2 months on this issue. Nothing was getting resolved. Bureaucracy grinding slow. Yeah, so he says he was frustrated. The note was just asking the key people to actually sit down, talk face to face, and sort it out.
And the outcome.
This is his key point here. He says the result of that discussion was that the public interest space in the project was expanded.
Expanded, not reduced.
Increased. From 800 square meters to over 1,100, he claims. So he asks, how can increasing the public benefit be a scandal?
That definitely flips the narrative on that specific point.
It does, and it leads right into his wider worries about the fairness of the whole process he's facing.
Right, the impartiality concerns. He used that symbol of justice.
Lady Justice, blindfolded, symbolizing objectivity. He basically says he feels that blindfold isn't on straight in his case. He accuses the prosecution of aiming solely for a conviction, using smears and insinuations, not just sticking to the facts.
That taps into a fundamental expectation we all have, doesn't it? That the legal system should be fair, unbiased.
Absolutely. And his comments really challenge whether that's happening here, at least in his view. This brings him to something really quite disturbing. The guilty pleas.
Ah yes, Peng Chen-sheng and Xiao Su-pei. He was puzzled by those.
Deeply puzzled, according to his statement. Said he read the indictment and just couldn't figure out why they plead guilty, or even what crime they supposedly confessed to.
And then his lawyers found something.
Yeah, discrepancies. Big ones, he suggests, between the official written transcripts of interrogations and the actual audio recordings.
Wait, so the recordings didn't match the written record?
That's what he's alleging. He gives an example with Peng Chen-sheng. An interrogation by prosecutor Lin Xunyan lasted over 4 hours.
Okay.
But he says a whole hour and a half wasn't recorded at all. And for the first 50 minutes that were recorded, there was no matching transcript provided initially.
That sounds problematic.
To say the least. And then he quotes what he claims the prosecutor said on the recording to Peng. Basically, if Ko gets away, you'll be the scapegoat. Like you win, like Li Shute. Ko will throw you under the bus.
Wow. That sounds like immense pressure. Coercion, almost.
It certainly raises questions about voluntariness. And he raises similar flags about Xiao Su-pei's interrogation.
What happened there?
He describes it as incredibly long. Morning until 11:20 p.m. with just one short break.
That's grueling.
And apparently, right after questioning resumed, she pleaded guilty. Again, Ko says he can't see what crime she admitted to. He expresses real empathy for her. He insists she's a person of integrity, calls her collateral damage.
You really get a sense of the human element there, beyond the politics.
Definitely. Individuals caught in this huge legal machine. And these alleged transcript and recording issues seem central to his defense now.
He seems convinced this will all come out.
He does. He sounds certain the discrepancies will be exposed eventually. But he's also worried.
Worried about
the damage it could do. Not just to his case, but to public trust in Taiwan's entire judicial system if these things are proven true. He directly challenges the prosecutor's conscience over it.
And quotes that line about fooling people.
Yeah, you can't fool all the people all the time. A clear warning shot.
Beyond his own situation, he also talks about bigger systemic problems.
He does. He maintains he wasn't involved in the technical details, like floor area ratios for Jinghua City. Doesn't know exactly what happened there.
But feels responsible anyway.
As the former boss, yes. He feels a duty to defend his team and the processes they used. And he asks these big questions. If the committees followed procedures, but things still went wrong later then?
What's wrong with our country's systems?
Exactly. What has happened to this nation? What's going wrong within our administrative structure? He thinks these are the questions that need investigating now.
So he's trying to elevate it beyond just his personal legal fight.
Seems that way. Framing it as potentially indicative of deeper issues in governance and administration that affect everyone.
How does he wrap it all up?
On a note of, well, resilience and hope, I suppose, he says he'll face it all positively, believes the truth will emerge.
And expresses hope for Taiwan's future.
Yeah, hopes for continued progress and that society will eventually see the full picture, the truth.
Okay, so recapping this deep dive into Ko Wen-je's court statement, the big takeaways are his strong denial of any personal corruption.
Detailed rebuttals on the Jinghua City specifics, like the lunchbox meetings and that note.
And these really significant concerns he's raising about the judicial process itself, fairness, transparency.
Especially focusing on those alleged discrepancies between interrogation transcripts and audio recordings and the questions surrounding those guilty pleas. He clearly thinks something is deeply wrong there, arguing that a just judicial system is, the bedrock of democracy.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with something to think about, doesn't it? When a public figure makes these kinds of serious allegations about the justice system, what does that do to public trust in institutions? How crucial is it that we can verify information, that due process is not just done, but seen to be done?
And what's the role of public scrutiny in making sure those principles are actually upheld? Lots to mull over there.